เตรียมตัวเด้อพนมมือเพิ่นว่าจังไดภาษาอังกฤษครับครับครับ
นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิก็ขอโอกาสจากครูบาอาจารย์พระเถระอนุเถระแล้วก็ขอเจริญพรและญาติโยมคืนนี้จะได้พูดเป็นภาษาอังกฤษให้ญาติโยมได้ทดลองดูว่าพระฝรั่งได้อยู่กับหลวงพ่อชาแล้วต้องนั่งฟังภาษาที่ไม่ค่อยรู้มันเป็นยังไง So I was just saying that tonight I'll be speaking in English and I'll give the opportunity for the Thai community to experience what it was like for a Prat Pharang to sit and listen to Dhamma that they didn't understand. So it's this evening is of course this is this gathering of Ajahn Chah's to honor him has been going on for many years now, and as the gathering continues over these years, there's an increased number of people who are coming from different countries, and it's not just people from local people or from just areas of Thailand, but coming from all different countries, many from Malaysia, Singapore, and then all of the various Western countries, all the Western branch monasteries. So it's quite an international gathering, and so it's I think it's important that these meetings are give the opportunity for people to experience this in these in different languages, so that having at least English as a second language for people, and certainly during the time of say beginning with Ajahn Sumedho, then there's just an increasing number of people coming from around the world, and Lumpur Sumedho he probably came here 50 years ago, over 51 years ago, came to stay with Ajahn Chah. And so that there's been a long history of this gathering of people of different languages being drawn to Ajahn Chah. And I think it's quite unique, really, how much Ajahn Chah was able to pull that interest and faith in all these different people, of course, not just Westerners, but all throughout Thai culture as well. But certainly for us as Westerners who showed up here in the early years, not being able to speak the language, but being inspired to live and train and draw close to Ajahn Chah, and and so that we didn't stay because we understood the language. We stayed because we were drawn to the qualities of Ajahn Chah, of his calm, of his presence of clarity, of his kind of his stability. I think that was one of the things that certainly drew me to want to live and train with Ajahn Chah. I was just seeing this person who was in the midst of, because by the time I came to stay with Ajahn Chah, there was already quite a large community of monks and nuns and lay people around him. And seeing somebody being in the middle of all these people and the different demands and requests and their the kind of events that inevitably take place, even in a monastery. But there was an unshakable quality to Ajahn Chah that was very inspiring and made one want to draw close to him and to stay on in order to try to imbue those qualities within ourselves, so that this quality of being peaceful is not just being shutting things out from experience, but being in the middle of experience and not being shaken by it. And I think that was something that was extremely inspiring. So seeing that and also there's an interesting mix. I think Ajahn Chah was somebody who was able to balance the kind of internal and external expressions of the Dhamma, and in that sort of internally, of course, he was clear, he was steady, he was articulate, he was funny, but so this sort of sense of good humor, but also there was a sense of he paid attention to the external circumstances, so that the monastery was set up in a way that was really the kutis were spread apart. There was, as one sees today, you come into this central area, and then outside of this central area was the area of the monastics' living quarters, and it created a space that was really supportive of practice, so that recognizing how the external and the internal work together, function together, creating spaces that were encouraging us in our practice, because we could have that balance of both the communal practice, where we are coming together in the central area, practicing together, doing our pujas together, but then on the external, on the outside of that central area, then there was places of solitude, so that, and even today, Wat Pah Pong is actually, for as large as it is and for as famous as it is, it's still a very peaceful monastery. I think people feel that, and that feeling of peace is accomplished through both the practice and training of the community, but also the external environment has been paid attention to. And it's quite important, because you can't. Oftentimes, there's not a balance in our lives, and Ajahn Chah was really attentive to those aspects of how to create a certain balance and a certain sense of harmony. In terms of the ways that Ajahn Chah trained us and things that he encouraged, that I think are important to, especially in a large gathering like today, where we've got many people coming from many different backgrounds. I think it's helpful to bring up for recollection some of the ways that Ajahn Chah encouraged us to train. And I think certainly one quality that is important is a sense of contentment. Being able to be content with the circumstances that one's in, being content with the requisites that we had. If one went to ask for requisites, oftentimes you get really grilled as to what happened to the things you had already. What did you do with them? Why do you need more already? So there's this learning how to be content with what we had, and learning how to use the requisites the simple requisites of being a monastic, which of course translates to say for the life of a layperson. Just the simple requisites of clothing, of food, of shelter, of medicines for when we're ill. Those are fundamental requisites for anybody. And so much of people's lives are spent in running around trying to get more of, or trying to get the newest variety of basic things for our existence that we think we need. But then when we start looking at it more closely, they're realizing, no, there is a simplicity that we can live with. And it doesn't mean one has to be, say, doing without or making oneself miserable, but learning how to pay attention to contentment. And this is something that, of course, this is one of the things that the Buddha himself pointed to in terms of indicators of a noble lineage, the Arya Vangsa, the lineage of the noble ones, those who have really tasted the Dhamma, and that being content with, say, with robes or with clothing, and being when one not doing things that are unskillful in order to gain, say, just a basic requisite of clothing for oneself, and not being upset or agitated because one doesn't or didn't get what one wanted, and living one's life in a skillful way so that one is satisfied with what one has. But another aspect as well of this, say, characteristic of one who is belonging to this noble lineage is that one doesn't say lift oneself up or put others down because of one's gaining of a requisite, gaining of say, of clothing or of robes. And so that the sense of self is not, one isn't either, the sense of self is not getting entangled in one's possessions, which is so often the case. How we measure our sense of self and self-worth. Do I have the newest thing? Or do I have the best thing? Or do I have the things that I like? So that and am I better than somebody else because I've got this? Which is that's just taking something very fundamental and basic to human existence and turning it into a vehicle for self and selfishness. So that's a problem, and that's not a characteristic of one who's within this noble lineage. And similarly for the requisite of shelter or of food, but then also the last thing that the Buddha points to as a indication of one who's within this noble lineage in terms of contentment with the relinquishing of the unwholesome qualities, unwholesome mental states, and the bringing into being content with and delighted in the lifting up and sustaining wholesome mental states, bright mental states, states of happiness and well-being. And that finding one's delight and happiness in that relinquishing of what is, what's unskillful, what's unwholesome, and finding one's that kind of delight and happiness, contentment in putting forth the effort to lifting up the heart to what is bright and skillful. And again, not exalting oneself and disparaging others because of one's contentment of doing that. So that's being content with training the mind, being content with the opportunity that we have to cultivate this path. That sense of contentment forming a basis of a training, and certainly Ajahn Chah exemplified it. He was that was one of his I would say one of his certain distinguishing characteristics. He basically I would maybe not say never, but almost never asked for anything. It was he made a point of living his life as a samana without asking for anything, and so that he wouldn't ask for any special consideration or special requisites for himself. He was willing to be patient and content with whatever situation he was in, and I think part of that was because his focus was always on giving. The sense of asking for something for himself just really probably didn't cross his mind, because his intent was really on giving and giving and sharing, so that he would. And he did make it a point of his practice and training, so that if any said, I've heard him say that he would, he just wouldn't ask for things. He felt if it was time for him to receive it, it would come of its own accord, and if it wasn't, then it wasn't the right time. So there was no point in asking anyway. So he would make that a part of his practice and training, and it was a part of his contentment, and he would do that, and even with things of just sometimes looking after himself. Oftentimes, I remember one time being with him during the hot season, and he was he was getting increasingly well known, so that there'd be a lot of visitors coming, and he would be there receiving and teaching and sharing Dhamma with people for extended periods of time, and I was helping to attend to him and trying to look after him, and I noticed him kind of from time to time scratching himself, and then so I asked him what if he was having some problem or something. And he kind of brushed it off, but then I pressed him, And because he'd been sitting, it was hot season, and he'd been sitting for long periods of time, just the whole area around his waist and lower back and stomach and lower legs, he had this incredible rash, and it must have been very uncomfortable. Never heard him complain, never heard him. And so then I asked if I could help look after him, and so that we're cleaning it up, powdering it, and keeping him dry, so that he would it would actually heal, and he just wouldn't. Again, just that sense of, I think he always perceived himself, if people were there, then he would give. And so there was this incredible generosity and contentment with being in circumstances that normally we would think of as uncomfortable, but he was content to be with that, thinking that he would, if he had the opportunity to give, he would share. And there was a real selflessness there that was extremely inspiring. And so that, I think that's one of the reasons why I think so many people are, say, attracted to him, is this, say, very direct sense of his compassion and kindness that he always displayed for others, and that's a quality that quite naturally draws others to him. So, and of course, all of these are qualities that we ourselves have the opportunity to cultivate and to emulate, because the result is, say, non-suffering, is freedom from suffering. And this is, of course, that's the whole purpose of the Buddha's teaching, and the whole purpose of the Buddha's path is to lead us, and because the Buddha said over and over again, I teach only two things: suffering, cessation of suffering. And to be able to recognize, investigate that suffering, what is the quality of suffering, why are we suffering, and then how do we come to a place of relinquishing and letting go, freeing the heart from suffering. And it isn't through, say, like going somewhere else, doing something else, getting what we want. It's through being able to be content to really watch it. And this is where this contentment is important. You start using it as a path of practice, and something that Ajahn Chah would sometimes, because Ajahn Chah was willing to go against the wishes or the desires of his disciples if he felt it was going to be to their benefit. And he wasn't afraid of anybody in that sense. He wasn't in your face trying to make you upset or anything. It was just like, because I can remember for myself wanting to, thinking up of all sorts of reasons to leave and go to practice in another place, that my practice was going to develop more quickly, in a better way, in the way that I thought was going to help me, and get all the reasons lined up in my mind, go and ask Ajahn Chah And you just say, no, stay here. and then, okay, I have to be content with that. This is what he said. Okay, stay. And that that happened on enough times that you sort of realize, okay, how to be content with being in a situation where one is wanting to be somewhere else, wanting to not have to be where one is. Of course, in the end, we're uncomfortable within ourselves, and we're not content with ourselves. We're not content with our own mind, not content with our own heart. So that sense of being able to develop the tools, and this is where, it's exactly what the Buddha points to. And of course, Ajahn Chah's teaching would always come back to the Four Noble Truths. Ajahn Chah, of course, taught in many different ways, different perspectives, but it would always come back to these Four Noble Truths, and to learn how to investigate, to investigate, to contemplate, to consider, and the word that say as a young monk who still didn't know the language very well, constantly hearing, say, the word pichalana, to investigate, to contemplate, and that, and of course, what is the object of that contemplation? What's the object of that investigation? And that's where just contemplating that aspect of our experience of dissatisfaction, of discontent, understanding what the cause is. What is the actual cause? Where's the attachment? Where's the desire? Where's the sense of becoming or annihilation, not wanting it to be this way, wanting it to be like this? And it's just those fundamental desires that the Buddha pointed to in his first discourse, and then recognizing that the tools come back to the simple quality of approaching things from a place of relinquishment, of letting go, of not hanging on, and a certain level of having a generosity, in the sense of a generosity of spirit that is willing to relinquish. Because so often we, especially if we've got a view or an opinion, or we've got a grudge or a perspective, how we particular like or dislike, we invest in it, and we're not, and we hang on to it, we tightly cling to it, and we're not very generous in our willingness to give it away, give it up. And this is where, in the Buddha's first discourse, where the Buddha points to these qualities that are essential for the experience of cessation of suffering. Chako, padinisago, mutti, analayo. These are all words around the sense of letting go. And chako is it has a lovely kind of dual meaning of both giving, generosity, but then also of giving up, giving away, being able to relinquish. Patinisago is a giving back. In the Thai language, it's sort of, to like salakun is to give back, and who are you giving back to? It's like giving back to nature, because we tend to accumulate and hang on to things that really don't belong to us, like just this body and this mind, these moods and they don't belong to us. And we create identities around them. We create our sense of self around it. And we burden ourselves with it. Of course, we burden everybody else around us as well with it. So then we to be able to give it back and to let it go. And that's in that sense of mutti is also to put down, to let go, to not carry the burden any longer. And the quality of analayo is like this non-sticky, non-clinging aspect, where one is not forming the identification around these fundamental aspects of our basic experience, body and mind, form, physical form, feeling, perception, memory, thoughts, moods, consciousness itself. These are aspects of nature that we need to learn how to rely on. We need to rely on them in order to cultivate wisdom and discernment. We need to rely on them in order to develop the qualities of equanimity and compassion. But it's also those same qualities that torment us and torture us because we don't understand their perspective. So that being able to approach this through a sense of contentment, relinquishment, generosity, and this experience, or the focus of this selflessness, where we're not carrying around a burden of self. And of course, that's exactly what Ajahn Chah embodied all the time, in the sense, if you think of the question of like, who is Ajahn Chah in terms of a self? Is he the ferocious taskmaster, which he was? Is that who he was? Is that his true self? Or was he the compassionate, kind and generous being that we'd see? Was he the humorous storyteller who could sort of really captivate you and hold your attention? Or he was the person who was sort of just droned on and on, seemingly for hours sometimes, just boring you to tears. Like, when is he going to end? Why doesn't he just stop talking and let us go to bed? Which is the Ajahn? Who is the real Ajahn Chah? Well, it's not having to carry around a saying, because he never identified with any of it. He didn't. There wasn't a self there, and that he had the freedom to see, well, what is actually useful? What's beneficial? What's going to bring benefit to others? And I don't think that. And he didn't really have an agenda to bring benefit to himself in that way. And I think that's one of the again, there's this inspiring qualities is that, besides, say, this sense of unshakability, is this sense of freedom, freedom from not having to be somebody. And that was extremely inspiring. And of course, that's something that is, and that the testament to it is, of course, even after he's passed away and been cremated for over 20 years, people are drawn to him and to his legacy. And that's something to really delight in and to keep bringing it to mind, so that because it's not just for it's not for just some kind of lifting up of a memory of Ajahn Chah for its own sake, but in order to help us to cultivate qualities which will lead us to a more peaceful life, a more happy life, a more beneficial life, relying on wisdom and discernment. So those are some thoughts, reflections this evening. I offer it. And as these days continue to unfold, and just to encourage everybody to keep trying to bring that memory and the teachings of Ajahn Chah into the heart, so that each person can grow and benefit. So I'll offer that.
เตรียมตัวกราบกราบกราบที่แสดงธรรมจบลงไปก็คือหลวงพ่อเจ้าคุณประสันโนวัดป่าอภัยคีรีประเทศอเมริกาก็ขออนุโมทนาให้หลวงพ่อมีสุขภาพพรรณนามัยแข็งแรงเป็นร่มโพร่มไทรของญาติโยมทางประเทศอเมริกาเดี๋ยวนี้ท่านก็ได้เป็นเจ้าคุณด้วยเป็นอุปชฌาย์ด้วย